Go and get a Puget Sound on, that's the kind of noise to pound on. Go and get a Puget Sound on for the Potlatch 1912. Hi, and welcome to the Doomed Planet podcast, episode 18, Seattle's racist golden potlatch. And there was not just one potlatch, there were many. And that eventually evolved into what we celebrate now every summer in Seattle, Seafair, with a displays of militarism, some civic boosterism, and the Blue Angels, little military propaganda. Lorraine McConaughey has a great bit at historylink.org about Seattle's potlatch bug. It's in 1912. The potlatch was first started in 1911 to celebrate the city's booming prosperity and also to, quote, capitalize on the popularity of the 1909 Alaska-Yukon Pacific Exposition. And this was created by the concept of the potlatch, and also the potlatch bug, which is their logo, was created by the Seattle Chamber of Commerce. And both newspapers, the Post-Intelligencer and the Seattle Times. And also the Seattle Advertising Club, which was run by Joseph Blethen. He's the eldest son of Seattle Times publisher Alden Blethen. If you're a fan of this podcast, you know that their true crime, really, and this is a true crime podcast, was losing out on the chance to sell the Seattle Times for $1 billion at the end of the 90s. And now they have almost nothing. They keep selling off their family real estate. And then 3 years later, some developer flips it and adds a zero. So it's really, the family is in a sad state right now. And the Seattle Times is it a one-page mimeographed sheet now? It's whatever it is, it's pathetic. If you are a fan of the Seattle Seahawks, you know that they have a logo that's art appropriated from Pacific Northwest Indian imagery. If you think of the totem pole, everyone is familiar with that. That sort of artwork. And the potlatch bug, the logo designed to promote the Seattle white people potlatch, or a series of potlatches. It is, again, it's this native mask that's been morphed and anglicized in a way. It's odd. It's oddly appealing. The Seattle Ad Club's slogan for potlatch was organized optimism. And the young ad men, quote, praised the festival's boosters and ridiculed any slackers or detractors as knockers. As the copy put it, the 1912 celebration would chase the village pessimist out into the never-never and establish a perennial parade of optimists on 2nd Avenue. And that's a parade that exists to this day. Let me correct myself. Seafair Parade usually goes down 4th Avenue. From History Link, the Seattle Potlatch myth, the 5 Alaskan tribal groups, all of course Seattle businessmen in costume, were responsible for constructing floats to lead the Great Potlatch Parade. So the tribe of Icht of the Bear Totem built an electrically lit float describing life on the lake, while the Moxt tribe depicted life in the air with the raven as its totem. So again, Seattle was decorated with 250 plaster totem poles, which bore the same exaggerated features as the potlatch bug. If you haven't guessed, the Aboriginals or natives in the area were left out of the planning of this festival. One great thing about the series of racist Seattle golden potlatches is that in 1913, the 1912 one was such a success that in 1913 they redid it, but it ended in violence against socialists. We'll get to that in a second. By the way, happy Easter. It is I'm reminded of this like no budget late 80s film called Black Easter. It might have even been shot on video that I came across. And it's really about a dysfunctional pervert who is also the cameraman and director stalking children while wearing a bunny costume. And it's horrible. We love that. It's funny, in a few years, by 1918, a horrible Spanish flu, as they called it, pandemic would hit Seattle with disastrous results. And there's this pandemic-themed Potlatch booster song. And the song is about the logo, or what they called the bug, which is, again, the appropriated native imagery, kind of cartoonicized and anglicized and corporatized. The potlatch bug's a fearful thing beyond imagination. When once it plants its venom sting, it means inoculation. The symptoms well are known to all, and so too is what the bite is. The aftermath the doctors call enthusiasmitis. Not a word. There is no further use to fight a prophylactic battle. The potlatch bug is sure to bite each booster in Seattle. Yay, Seattle, and to the big businesses that make this city roll.
Yo, I'm a tortilla.
I'm a tortilla, baby. I got cheese.
I got beans.
I got the little bit of meat and
sour cream.
So the Alaska Gold Rush of 1897, that really put Seattle on the map long before Amazon put Seattle on the map, or Microsoft, or Boeing. And it produced a flood of new business and explosive growth. The town would be 250,000 people. That's actually half of what it was when I moved here by the World's Fair in 1909. Also called the Alaska Yukon Pacific Exposition. And funny story, my friend Elaine and I published a neighborhood newspaper called the Belltown Messenger. You can Google that. And for one of our early issues, we started out saying we were going to be this neighborhood booster, and we're going to kiss ass to the real estate developers, and they're going to buy ads. And then it devolved, of course, into the same old anti-establishment tripe that you are hearing on this podcast. So we went to in Pioneer Square, there's the Alaska Yukon Gold Rush Museum, I think it's called. And, he said, we want to do an article about this museum, and can you help us out, do an interview? And then when the issue came out, we just had this big giant cover, and there was a place called Vintage Corsets, I think, that actually made corsets, and our photographer photographed like this 1890s dame in a corset. And the headline was Gold, Whiskey, and Prostitutes, Seattle in 1897. And the people at the museum were horrified. So if you want to donate to a worthy nonprofit, probably wouldn't be the Celebration of Greed and Gold Museum in Seattle. It would be the Potlatch Fund at potlatchfund.org. They say, quote, our work is inspired by the ceremonial potlatch, a traditional gift-giving ceremony in which clans and families distributed wealth throughout their communities. Establishing a gift economy, these potlatches encouraged wealth distribution and helped to build tribes based on social equity and communal responsibility. We tried to mentally grasp that in our previous episode, Potlatch, Aboriginal Excess, Doom Planet, episode 17, but failed. So at the end of this episode, I'm just going to read a little more about the native potlatch to try to do it justice. But now back to Seattle's racist golden potlatch. The powers that be in Seattle are always trying to get people to come here and have a party. And I dug up this gem. It's from 1900, so not really a Yukon exposition and not really a potlatch. The Seattle PI, June 24, 1900. Join with us, patriotic celebration at Seattle. July 3rd and 4th, 1900. Grand Parade. Something new, something worth seeing. Everything any 4th of July celebration ever had, and some additions. So I could say really bad advertising copy that always says, and more. Open air sports. The annual Pacific Northwest Field and Track Championship Games. Yachting by Pacific Coast Clubs. Balloon ascension. Balloons will go up. Aeronauts will make the parachute jumps. Wow. So you got people jumping out of balloons with a parachute. That was probably pretty wild in 1900. Bicycle races. Wow, that's the concept of like a overweight middle-aged white guy shoving themselves into these tight bike pants and then racing around Seattle with their buddies and talking really loud. That's not new. Street games, all sorts of tricks, from the three-legged race to the climbing of greased poles. A relay race between three rival crews of messenger boys will be a novelty. So yeah, messenger boys back then. What a life you would have had in 1900 as a messenger boy. You know, witness it if you're downtown, witnessing all the filth and degradation and impoverished natives wandering around in a drunken haze. 2-day show. All these things will be distributed over July 3rd and 4th. Be present both days, if possible. Either day will amply repay you. Okay, there will be a customary oration and reading of the Declaration of Independence. Bands of music. So the 80s and partially 90s Seattle music scene, that's not a novelty. There were bands of music. 4 bands will give concerts afternoons and evenings of both days. Prizes offered for best bands in parade. Bicycle parade on the night of July 3rd. There'll be a monster illuminated bicycle parade. Bring your bike and get in line. A novel feature will be a band of music on wheels, each player riding on the rear seat of a tandem. You know, I wish there were more photographs of this stuff, but that's pretty scarce. One wonders if did that happen? Well, we don't have the time or resources to look into that one. And, of course, Indians on parade. A part of the parade will be given over to a Wild West feature containing Indians bucking broncos and cowboys. Fireworks. A $5,000 fireworks exhibition which has never been equaled in this part of the country. Anyone who's lived in Seattle long enough knows that it's always foggy and visibility is always bad on the night of July 4th. So that first Potlatch in 1912 worked out well, and then July 21st, 1913, the Alaska Daily Empire. Big headline, rioting marks Seattle Potlatch. Sailors and soldiers raid Seattle Socialists. Mayor George F. Cotterill took personal command of the police on account of the rioting last night. This morning he issued a proclamation declaring that an emergency exists and that he will personally direct the police department in the effort to enforce law and order. All saloons of the city have been closed, and street meetings of all kinds prohibited. Publication of the Times suspended. Mayor Cotterill also suspended the publication of the Seattle Daily Times for today and tomorrow. The Times is accused of encouraging and abetting the mob attack upon the Socialists and IWW followers. The mayor directs that there shall be no edition of the Times permitted issued unless proofs of all matter that it is intended to publish be first submitted to him for inspection. Now, kind of like illegally taking away the First Amendment rights of the Seattle Times, regardless of what right-wing dicks they are, sort of is reminiscent of the WTO when Mayor Paul Schell announced a no protest zone in some of these commercial districts in downtown Seattle. a blatantly illegal directive. And so people wearing no WTO pins on their jackets were being harassed by cops. Insane. And of course, Governor Gary Locke sent in the National Guard, and police chief and Dick Norm Stamper, who later became a pot-smoking bearded hippie, was forced to resign. And boy, that WTO bullshit we have well documented. It's been too painful to look into, but this is a Seattle true crime podcast, so we will get to it. Recently, there's been a TV ad produced by Trump Associates that shows former Seattle governor and ambassador to China, Gary Locke, misrepresenting him as a Chinese official, and it's just deeply racist. Sadly, Gary Locke was a terrible governor who, he's working for big corporate interests. He gave Boeing the largest corporate welfare / tax break in the history of corporate America and enabled them to move much of their manufacturing to a right-to-work state. I believe South Carolina. That just means a racist, redneck, backward state where the people who vote are disenfranchised, and so the Republican right-wing dicks in power can do what they want, including try to pay engineers and highly skilled builders of airplanes lower wages than they would get elsewhere. And of course, that hasn't worked out well long-term for Boeing. So thanks, Gary Locke. You aren't the saint that left-wing media is presenting you as these days. And I hope you crawl back to your opulent, corporate-financed McMansion or / McMansions and stay out of the fucking news.
After the factory, we bring them over here for flight testing and then delivery to the airlines. The 747 is the latest in a long line of Boeing commercial aircraft.
The Alaskan Daily Empire, Seattle, July 19th. Seattle was the scene of wild rioting last night. Sailors from the battleships in Seattle's harbor and soldiers from Fort Lawton, aided by citizens, fell upon members of Socialists and the industrial workers of the world. They demanded all the wagons used for street meetings by the IWW and the Socialists. They wrecked the Socialists' halls, stacked up in the streets, and burned their furniture, emblems, and paraphernalia. The Socialists probably had a lot of weed-smoking paraphernalia, primitive cedar bongs and whatnot. There's very little evidence of marijuana use in Seattle prior to when I arrived here in 1990. They attacked and beat socialist street speakers and members. And then July 21st, the Seattle Times secured an injunction Saturday preventing the mayor from interfering with the issuance of the newspaper. That is, regardless of the centuries-old history of right-wing dickery of the Seattle Times, this is a victory for what America stands for, which is the freedom to publish what you want. And another news item, the Potlatch came to an orderly ending Saturday at midnight. There was no further rioting after Friday night. So that's just the kind of thing that the corporate boosters in charge want to hear, I guess, or not. The Seattle business community has always hated socialists, and you look at Sawant, our socialist city council member today, and the hatred and invective and money thrown against her to try to prevent her agenda, which is really, based on helping normal people by taxing big business. From the Seattle General Strike Project of the University of Washington, the IWW, the newspapers, and the 1913 Seattle Potlatch riot by James Larrabee. By the late afternoon of July 19th, 1913, the Seattle headquarters of the Industrial Workers of the World lay in ruin. Along with 2 Socialist Party offices and a socialist newsstand, It had been looted and its contents dumped into the street and burned by a mob of locals and visiting sailors. And you can imagine the drunkenness. The sailors were in town for the Golden Potlatch Festival. They had become involved in a shouting match with a group listening to a street speaker in Seattle's Pioneer Square neighborhood. In an exhaustive account of the riot for their biography of Seattle Daily Times editor Alden J. Blethen, Sharon Boswell and Lorraine McConaughey seem to agree with the position of many contemporaries of the riot that it was caused by an incendiary newspaper article written in the Times in which the brawl was blamed on the members of the IWW. So the socialists and the drunken sailors and drunken socialists had a street brawl, and that erupted into riots. Whatever the cause, the day after the brawl, a large mob, accounts vary from several hundred to several thousand, began its rampage through the city, destroying anything related to the IWW or the socialist cause. The morning of July 19th, the city was under martial law. Seattle's Golden Potlatch grew out of the Seattle Yukon Exposition of 1909, celebrated Seattle's maritime heritage, much in the same way as Seafair, which is really the bastard child of the Seattle Golden Potlatch, celebrates today. The Navy would send a portion of its Pacific Fleet into Elliott Bay, and there would be patriotic parades and speeches, and that continues to this day with Seafair. The Potlatch riot became a symbol of the bias that the police and the military had against the IWW, who were blamed for causing the riot. The brawl that started the riot is a mystery. No one has a good account of what actually happened there, or if it did happen. Gosh, the 1913 potlatch that ended in a drunken riot, it makes me long for the good old days of the 1912 Seattle Golden Potlatch. Seattle and King County invite you to the Golden Potlatch at Seattle, July 15th to 20th. A week of fun and gorgeous pageantry, 6 days of color and carnival, street parades, aeroplanes, Alaskan spectacles by the Tillicums of Eltays. And again, the Tillicums are a group of white businessmen dressing as Indians. War boats, boys in blue, thousands of school children in stirring pageants and tableaux. Something big doing every minute. Every feature free. July 15th, Monday, Elks Day. July 16th, Tuesday, Merchants Day. Special rates on all railroads. Here's the Washington Standard, July 11th, 1913. The Tyee, his sitcom chiefs, and the first white man at Seattle's Golden Potlatch. And you see a white guy standing with 4 either Native Americans or other white guys dressed as sitcom chiefs. With the arrival of the gold ship Portland at noon on the 17th of July, and again, they're reenacting when that first gold ship came laden with gold from Alaska to Seattle and set off a frenzy of greed and speculation, American style, comes the Tyee of the Potlatch, accompanied by his sitcom chiefs and shamans. The Tyee is chosen from among the leading businessmen of Seattle and reigns supreme during the potlatch. The word potlatch is taken from the quaint jargon of the Chinook and means a gift. That's partially right. Many of the area's tribes in what is now, Pacific Northwest, United States, and Canada had potlatches. It means a gift, something freely given. The Indian of Washington's water reaches and the Alaskan coast expanded the definition so that potlatch came to mean a feast, or better, a festival given by the chief of the tribe, which lasted until the host had given away to his guests all of his worldly possessions. In the end, he was broke, but he had the time of his life and was respected until his dying day. So again, racist old-timey newspapers are not going to get facts correct necessarily. And there's a picture, a section of the children's parade at the Seattle Golden Potlatch. The children are dressed as white bunnies. One of the prettiest and to many one of the most satisfying events of the entire week is the Children's Playfield Parade. Each one of the city's 16 fully equipped playfields is represented by a queen and her court, and the enthusiasm runs high. From 1911, a week of recreation and jollity. July 17th to 21st, inclusive, Seattle's Golden Potlatch, celebrating the anniversary of the arrival of the first golden treasure from Alaska in 1897. Some of the doings of Potlatch Week will be water feats and sports, historical and artistic pageants, aerial flights daily by Curtis, Eli, and others, the arrival and welcome of King Gold. I mean, that says it all about Seattle. It's like what the history of Seattle. The natives lived here for tens of thousands of years, if not longer. Then the white people came and stole their land and killed most of them so that they could worship gold, to the point where they have this arrival and welcome of King Gold. Because in Seattle, we worship gold above all else. And of course, before we had the Blue Angels sort of military propaganda air show to delight the masses, we had the Barnstormers, including some famous ones that would perform at the Potlatch. Probably really fascinating in 1911 to see someone in an aeroplane do crazy stunts. Before we try to do justice to the Aboriginal potlatches of yore, I want to do a Facebook peek. Again, I quit Facebook. I do have a fake account or 5 where I can check up on stuff and do research, but and this comes from a position of privilege, like everything I fucking say, but one of my college roommates, I'm thankfully not on there with anymore. He works for a magazine called Mainline Today. And if you're familiar with the East Coast of the United States and the city of Philadelphia, the Main Line is basically the neighborhood of rich white people to the north of the city. And you go to their website and it literally, there's a picture of a McMansion. That's what you see as the first thing on the website as of today. Look inside this Marion Station Homes Garden Oasis. And of course, so the media is racist, and I'm, my poor friend, he's just, again, a person of privilege who fell into this cushy job. Although, God, these city magazines are just dead. These glossy magazines that the business model was already dead. I seem to mention that and mention one of these magazines during every single one of these podcasts. So yeah, that's Rusty, the media watchdog. One thing that was really offensive, and could go on for a million hours about things that are offensive on social media and Facebook. A couple years ago, Mainline Today had this. The cover was, a celebration of the police, and it was a white cop. So that says it all. Rusty,
The media watchdog.
podcast shout out. This time, Jimmy Dore. He's a profane, sarcastic asshole. He's got some funny writers. I enjoy his podcast. And he is 1,000,000% correct to call out Bernie Sanders and AOC and any other progressives for voting blindly on the multi-trillion-dollar corporate bailout. There are some good provisions in the bill. If you're lucky enough to be on unemployment, as millions are not, you're going to get an extra $600 a week. But really, this was the largest giveaway of tax dollars to big business in the history of the world. So thank you, podcast shout out, Jimmy Dore.
Podcast shout out.
Ooh, Rusty. The media watchdog, I forgot to mention Duff McKagan of Guns N' Roses wrote a book. We're going to buy the book, and we're going to eviscerate the book. And I can guess what's in the book. How to Be a Man and Other Illusions by Duff McKagan and Chris Cornelius, his ghostwriter. The co-founder of Guns N' Roses, Velvet Revolver, and Walking Papers, shares what the hard-knock rock life has taught him about how to be a good dude in spite of it all. We're coming for you, Duff. I mention this because he's recently been on right-wing media claiming, he's a Seattleite, claiming he does not travel to downtown Seattle without a knife. He said this in all seriousness more than once because of the horrible crime. Oh, Duff. And he's supposed to be this badass. He said, I've traveled to cities all around the world, and downtown Seattle is the scariest stuff. The party's over, bitch. We're coming for you. It's going to be fun. Maybe we'll do that next episode. They'll have to buy the book. Nah, fuck it. I'll just get the Kindle preview of the book, and we'll just go from there. There's no reason to read the whole book that he and his... he's supposed to be this great writer and stuff. He wrote for the Seattle Weekly at one point. But so why does he need a ghostwriter named after his dead friend, or in honor of his dead friend, Chris Cornelius? So to sum up Seattle's racist history of potlatches that is now Seafair, there were some potlatches. The second one in 1913 ended in a riot between drunken right-wing citizens and sailors and drunken socialists. I think they tried to revive the potlatch a few times, but again, the annual Seattle parade celebrating our maritime heritage, our business heritage, our military heritage, that continues to this day. And one wonders if we will hear the Blue Angels this summer. Air traffic is down 95% around Seattle and the world, and it's a joy to not have to hear that. And I don't think we want the Blue Angels back. Correct me if I'm wrong. So we'll try to make up for the last episode where we didn't quite do justice to the tradition of the potlatch by describing it here at the end of our show. And again, this is written by white people based on observations by white cultural anthropologists, they call them, but at least it's something. The word quakiutl, pronounced quakiutl. It's an English pronunciation of a name from the Quagit language, which is pronounced by the natives closer to Quagilth. Another name which is commonly used is Kawakawakawak, and that means speakers of the Kwakwala language. The rivalry between chiefs and clans finds its strongest expression in the destruction of property, much like it does today in our modern neoliberal, austere capitalist society. A chief will burn blankets, a canoe, or break a copper, thus indicating his disregard of the amount of property destroyed and showing that his mind is stronger and his power is greater than that of his rival. A copper would be like a 1.5 foot tall copper amulet. That was basically a giant coin, and you could exchange that for much wealth. I think it's worth hundreds or thousands of blankets. If the latter chief is not able to destroy an equal amount of property, his name is broken and he loses the property destroying contest. He's vanquished by his rival and his influence with his tribe is lost, while the name of the other chief gains correspondingly in renown. Feasts are also counted as destruction of property because the food given cannot be returned except by giving another feast. And the most expensive sort of feast is when enormous quantities of fish oil are consumed and burnt, the so-called grease feast. And again, they were using the eulachon. It's like a smelt They also called this the candle fish because you could literally dry out these fish and stick a wick in them, and you had a candle that's going to last a long time. So I can't do justice to this potlatch. I am sorry, native people. It's super complex. It's a rivalry between chiefs where they destroy stuff, and then the next chief has to have a bigger party and destroy more stuff. And again, these Aboriginals are very relatively wealthy because of the bounty that comes in from the ocean and from the forest, especially those freaking salmon runs. The grease is filled in large spoons, passed to the rival chief.
We'll be right back after this message. I'm a person. They're gonna kill us all. I wish I was shorter because they like people that are tall.
I was able to mock the Seattle Chamber of Commerce potlatch music, but I'm not going to do that with the sort of well-documented music of the Kwakiutls. I know Franz Boas and his team spent a great deal of time meticulously documenting every aspect of their culture that they could. And of course, they practiced slavery, and it's sort of a patriarchal thing with the Kwakiutls. Marriage among the Kwakiutl must be considered a purchase, which is conducted on the same principles as the purchase of a copper. But the object bought is not only the woman, but also the right of membership in her clan for the future children of the couple. All the tribes along the Pacific coast were divided into nobility, common people, and slaves. Much like today, the corporation known as Amazon is divided into nobility, which would be a handful of executives, common people, which would be the decently compensated software engineers destroying their brains, sitting there programming shit all day, and the slaves being, of course, the robots and the humans working in the Amazon warehouses. Slaves are made captives in war or purchased, and they can change ownership as with any other piece of property. None of the white people witnessed the alleged cannibalism of these tribes. It seems to exist in legend and to not have happened within a few hundred years. There was one story of the killing of a slave. A female slave was asked to dance for the hamatsa. Before she began dancing, she said, "Do not go hungry, do not eat me." She had hardly said so when her master, who was standing behind her, split her skull with an axe. She was eaten by the hamatsa. This happened in Nwedi and Nyam Anakola, who participated in the performance and was living until a couple of years ago, according to the account. Quote, "He told me that it is exceedingly hard to eat fresh human flesh, and much more so than to eat dried corpses." The bones of the killed slaves were kept at the north side of the house, where the sun does not shine upon them. During the fourth night they were taken out of the house, tied up, weighted with a stone, and thrown into deep water, because it is believed that if they were buried, they would come back and take their master's soul. When the hamatsa had bitten a piece out of the arm of one of his enemies, he drank hot water after having swallowed the flesh. It was believed that this would result in the inflammation of the wound. Nowadays, when the ceremonies have lost much of their former cruelty, they do not actually bite the piece of flesh out of the arm. And again, this is someone speaking in 1890. But they merely pull the skin up with their teeth, sucking hard so as to remove as much blood as possible, and then with a sharp knife cut off secretly a piece of skin. This is not swallowed, but hidden behind the ear until after the dance. Again, I'm trying to do justice to the potlatch ceremony and to the cultures that performed it, but I've devolved, because there's a true crime podcast, I've devolved into the barbarism of the natives eating each other and killing slaves. So let's finally end this Easter Sunday 2020 episode of the Doomed Planet podcast with a little bit about the superheroes, the quackudal superheroes of legend. Long before you had, capitalist dicks like Iron Man or any of these male adolescent power fantasies cooked up during World War II and after, this American-style schlock comic superheroes. You had, every culture throughout time has these legends of these omnipotent beings. Again, long before Marvel and DC, the quackudal had much more interesting stories. Bakwana Wiksek, the first one to eat man at the mouth of the river. He is a cannibal living on the mountains who is always in pursuit of man. Smoke rises from his house. His servant or wife is Kid Dinamakis, the rich woman who procures food for him. He has a female slave, Kin Kalakalala, who also procures food for him by catching men and gathering corpses. Near the door in his house sits his slave, Kwak Waxalanoluk Sextwe. Again, apologies for these pronunciations of unpronounceable words. The raven, who eats the eyes of the people whom his master has devoured. In his house also lived the Kohaksak, a fabulous bird with an immensely long beak, which lives on the brains of men, whose skulls he fractures with his beak. This has been the Doomed Planet podcast. I'm your host, Alex. You can reach me at doomedplanet.com or doomedplanetpod, P-O-D, @gmail.com. Goodbye.
5, 6, 7, 8.
Goodbye, this is it.